Hey everybody, welcome back to my shop. Thanks for joining me today. If you're here for the first time, my name's Anthony. Welcome to the channel. It's all about woodworking, carpentry, and the occasional motorcycle video, riding, motovlog, and some parts changing and things like that, and upgrades, all right? I get a lot of good feedback on that. If you've been here before, then welcome back. All right, so now the summer's coming to a close. It's getting a little cool out, and most of the vacations are over. I said most, not all. I got some vacations left up my sleeve. We're gonna dig into some of the different species of softwoods and hardwoods. I have some laid out behind me, as you can see on the table saw. I also have another one off to the side here. We're going to discuss what I use those specific woods for and what kinds of projects, because certain woods are not good to use in certain projects and certain woods are much better to use. So I'm also going to explain to you on the process of choosing that lumber and where to buy it and things like that. Okay, so stick around and let's dig in. Okay, so if you hear some noise in the background, they are working with a lot of trucks across the street on the house on the other side of the block, and there's a lot of cement trucks and everything like that. So a little bit of static in the background. So just try to block that out, disregard, and concentrate on the good stuff, which is the different types of material that we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so I'm going to start with the softwood family first, and I'm going to tell you what I use those for. So now I'm going to go with first pine family. This is Douglas fir. When I say it's in the pine family is because Douglas fir is a tree that grows in the Northwest. People say that Douglas fir is pine because it resembles pine. It has the same grain structure and grain patterns and knots as pine. Okay, so it is Douglas fir, and it is its own entity right there, its own species. Okay, so like I said, it grows in the Northwest, not in the Northeast, but it is shipped here and sold. As you might know, it's most widely used in the big box stores for 2x6s, 2x8s, 2x4s. Okay, now it's a softwood, just like pine, so you can leave nail marks in it and everything like this. Now, I'm going to tell you that it is actually a good structural and a stable wood, and I know what you're thinking right off the bat. You're saying, how the hell can you say that Douglas fir is a stable wood? I've been to Home Depot. I've seen these things in the rack when I go to buy 2x4s, and they look like potato chips. The thing's curled up like this and twisted, and I can't find a good one. Well, I'll tell you why I say it's stable. When you find those potato chip looking boards in the big box stores, Home Depot, Lowe's, and things like that, that is a lack of caring. If you look closely at the tags, it'll tell you kiln dried Douglas fir, right? So you're saying, okay, so if it's dried in a kiln, it should be stable and straight. Well, the problem is the company does that and they dry it quickly so that they can sell it faster. However, what happens now is they go and they deliver it to the big box store, and what do? They dump a big pallet of it, all shrink wrapped or metal tied together and squeezed together, one board on top of the other, just like this. So now you have those boards sitting in the parking lot, either in the heat from the sun on a hot day, or in the cold, in the rain, in the snow, whatever climate it is, it's sitting out there, one board on top of the other, no space in between. So what happens there? The moisture in this board and this board are just constantly going back and forth between each other. And you have another board underneath, and there's no air circulation. So now, as they're building moisture back from the climate change, they're sucking up the moisture from board to board, and they're shrinking, they're expanding, and they're moving all over the place. And then what's going on is, while they're out there getting rained and snowed on, sitting in the sun, their employees are walking around and like, oh, hey, we got a pallet of 2x4s, or 2x6s, let's bring it inside. They bring it inside, they take it, and they just throw it right on the rack. And now you're in a climate-controlled warehouse, because it's all closed in these big box stores. They have air conditioning, they have heat, depending on whatever season they're in. And now it's either rapidly drying, or it's staying wet for a long period of time. So what happens then, you bring it home, you change the climate again, and boom, the thing curls up, and you can't use it, it's useless. So that's why most people will take that and they'll use it as studs for walls. 2x6s and 2x8s will be for floor joists and the roof rafters and things like that. Not only are they good structurally still, but if they move a little bit, they're hidden between sheetrock walls and insulation. It doesn't matter if they're a little curved. They don't care about that. They're building with it, and you'll never see it again. So I'm going to tell you it's stable because I dry them out the proper way. So here's a 2x6 that I've milled up over a year ago, dried it out properly, and I've used it now. You can see that there's all kinds of stains on it and everything like that. And that's because what I do now is, because this is a scrap piece that I'm not using for a project, I like to lay it down and have pieces rest on it when I spray polyurethane or whatnot. So if you look at that board, that's still flat and true. There's no twisting, there's no cupping, there's no warping. The board, I don't know if you can really get a good vision of that on the camera, but the board is absolutely perfect still. And it's been over a year. And I think it's very affordable. Obviously, you can go and buy these things for a couple of bucks. I mean, a 2x4 is like a little over $3. I like to do barn doors with pine because it's the old school way of doing it. You use pine and it just looks great. If you're gonna have them outdoors, then I would use a more rot resistant and insect repellent wood. Trust me, we'll get into that later on. Okay, let's move on to my next semi-softwood. This is actually in the hardwood family, but it's the softest of the hardwoods, and that's poplar. Okay, so now before we move on, the Douglas fir, you can paint or stain it and it looks amazing because of the grain pattern. Now poplar, on the other hand, it also has really nice grain patterns and really nice designs. It could be really straight and it could be interesting. It has different shades to it. But here's the kicker on this. People say you can't stain poplar, it doesn't look good. And I'm gonna tell you I agree and I disagree. And here's where the conflict comes into play. You can stain poplar, I've done it before, I've done it 100 times, only with a dark stain. I don't like to use a light stain on it because when you get discolorations like this, and you'll notice that there's some parts of poplar, and if you look at this board here on one side, it's got a nice whitish beige tone to it, and then you turn it around and it has this green tint in there. And that does not show up well with a light stain because it seeps through and it discolors it completely. So what I like to do is use a really dark stain on this, and then that lets the grain pattern through and it hides all that green tint. And you can still see the knots and everything like that, but you won't get this two-tone green and brown look. That's really important because you don't want to spend all that time building a project and then ruin it with a stain and have to sand it down again. Poplar, what I love to use poplar for is painted projects. So when I'm making small cabinetry and things like that, built-ins, all the face frames and stuff like that, for stuff that's not going to get heavy handling, I'll use poplar and I'll paint it white or whatever color you want to paint it. It paints up really, really well. It's very, very closed pores. So when you get that coat of primer on there, it seals it up. You sand it down a little bit, makes it like glass, go over it, you spray 2 coats of a really good paint, and this stuff will look amazing and very stable. This is a very stable wood also. Okay, so that is in the hardwood family, but it's the softest of the hardwoods. This is a piece of cherry. Now, cherry it's rather expensive. So I don't use it too often because I don't really have the clientele who always want to pay for this kind of stuff. But what I do use it for, I'd love to make a full table out of cherry, but I don't think it's going to be in the future because it would cost a fortune in material. But what I do use it for mainly is it's very good closed grain wood, and it is a very durable hardwood, and I like to use it when I do different colored cutting boards, like layered cutting boards or end grain cutting boards. And it will be a piece of cherry, a piece of maple, and the color contrast, it's beautiful. And once the oil hits this, it ages and gets darker as it ages. So, you know, you have this nice like reddish tone to it now, and then as the oil seeps in over the years or whatever finish, it just deepens and richens that red, and it just becomes this beautiful orangey red, almost like a rich mahogany. You're doing cabinetry, if you do use cherry, obviously the cost will be a little bit more, so the profit margin will be a little bit less, but you're going to make a beautiful kitchen. The face frames, and if you choose to use, you know, solid panels for the actual middle of the doors, if you're doing raised panels, it's going to be costly and it's going to be time consuming, but this is a very stable wood and it has great characteristics in it. And what I like to do, sometimes I'll incorporate, you see there's some sapwood and it changes the tone there. I'll incorporate something like that into a table. if I'm making a small end table or a coffee table or something like that, or even a dining room table. Double check with your clients, because if you make that a seam, if they don't like the way that looks when it comes together, that could cost you also, because you'll have to cut that out and re-glue up a new piece. Some things you need to take into consideration, but this is very stable wood, very hard wood. It's great for a lot of projects. Okay, now I'm gonna move on to some of my real favorites here. And that is red oak, which I build a lot of stuff with red oak. It's very stable, it's a very hard wood. It is quite porous, so if you're doing something where you really don't want exposed open grain, you really have to use a good sealer on there, okay? So you can do grain filling also. They sell, there's ways you can do grain filling. A few of the ways are you can buy an actual grain filler, which looks like a putty, and you put it on and it seeps into the pores, and then you sand it down and it fills all those pores and makes a smooth surface. I like to use this for certain projects like cabinetry. You can make tables out of this. It looks great. Red oak looks great for interior doors. It's just amazing. And you can stain it. You can, I would never paint over any oak. Number one, it's an expensive wood, and you're really killing that grain pattern. You really want to see the true definition of the grain in the oak. And that goes the same for the white oak, which I'm going to show you next. Okay, so the great for red oaks, great for interior projects, very hard wood, cabinetry tables, things like that, doors. All right, you can stain it, you can just clear finish over it, and it will give you a really nice finish. Oil changes the tone of it. Just make sure you experiment on these things before you actually go and put a finish or a stain over the piece. So that's going to move us on now to white oak. Now, you just saw me complete a project with this. That was the outdoor, it was like a planter's bench, pottery bench. That was our potting bench. That was for clients' backyard. And it's going to stay outdoors for the spring and the summer, and just maybe a little bit into the early fall. And then they're going to bring it into their garage for the winter, and that's a good idea because it's going to last them a lot longer than it would if you were just to leave it out over the years. I mean, it's rot resistant, insect resistant, so it's a great choice for outdoor projects. It has a beautiful grain pattern. White oak is more expensive than red oak, and I'm guessing for the reasons of its qualities that, like I said, it's more rot resistant, insect resistant, and it also has nicer grain patterns, and it's a little bit harder to get. Red oak in the north region here, the northeast region of North America, red oak is very popular. It's very easy to get. White oak, not so much. The end grain looks phenomenal on it. The grain pattern, really straight and like mesmerizing grain pattern. So really tight, closed grain. White oak is great for a lot of things, okay? So what I would do is I would either do any kind of stain you can do on here that lets the grain come through, or just a natural finish. Now, what I did on that potting bench was I used an outdoor exterior finish. The exterior, I think, was $450, exterior $450 from General Finishes. And that's good to last about 3 to 5 years. The wood itself is not going to rot probably for 15 to 20 years, and that's if they don't care for the finish in the recommended time of 3 to 5 years. So this will sit out in the rain, the snow, the cold, the sun, anything you can throw at it, and the longer it stays outside, you'll get that really grayish old wood, like barn look. And that's what they're going for also, really nice look. So there's a lot you can do with white oak. Okay, now we're gonna just go to another hardwood that I use, and this is just regular maple. Now, maple is a seriously hardwood also. Most commonly used in cabinetry. Cabinet doors, the face frames of the cabinet carcasses. There's a lot you can do with maple. You can paint it. It's moderately priced. It can be expensive, but it's not as expensive as white oak. Now, when you mill up, the difference, however, is in the quality with red oak to maple. When it's a very tight, closed grain. So when you mill this up and you sand it down, this thing is literally just like a piece of glass. Tight, closed grain. You won't feel any splintering, and it paints up really nice. Now here's where you might say, like, why would you paint it? Okay, well, here's a good example. If you're doing custom cabinetry, or you're doing a door frame on a carcass of a cabinet, or the raised panel, you don't want to use poplar really on that door frame. You can, if, like I said, it's going to get light use, but if you're doing let's say in a kitchen, you're doing a full kitchen, and you know that those doors are going to be constantly used, they're going to be hit, they're going to be, people's nails are going to dig into it when they go to grab the knob, they're going to get a lot of heavy use. You want a hardwood that's not going to mar when a person's fingernail hits it. Poplar will do that. So if you use maple for doors and face frames of carcasses, you won't get that damage that you would with a softer wood. So you can paint this up. It paints up beautifully, and that's what I would use it for. Now, staining, on the other hand, there's a couple of ways you can go with this, because maple is finicky when it comes to staining. If you don't use a pre-stain conditioner on maple and you just put a straight stain on there, you're going to get a ton of blotching all over. It's going to take in certain spots because it's going to soak in certain areas, and then other areas it's going to be so tight grained and closed that it's not going to allow the stain to penetrate, and so you're going to have light spot, dark spot, light spot, and it's going to look like a polka dotted piece of maple, and it's not a good look. So what you want to do, use a good pre-stain conditioner, then you can stain it, but keeping in mind that it is maple, so you want to stay relatively close to that golden look that maple has. You don't want to take a piece of maple and stain it some kind of a crazy brown that oak would already be, and you could like use white oak and then just put either a golden oak stain on it and get the color you want, or just put a polyurethane or a lacquer and it would be the exact color you want. You don't want to try to turn this into something it's not. Okay, so stick with either an oil-based finish, which will give it a deep, rich golden glow like you'll see most cabinetry, that natural look, or you can paint it up. All right, so let's move on to our next wood, which this is just pretty amazing stuff. This is ambrosia maple. Now, if you're not familiar with ambrosia maple, you can see all these lines and tracks in here, and these tiny little holes. Okay, ambrosia maple gets its name from being tracked and eaten by ambrosia beetles. So all these marks and grain patterns that you think they're grain patterns, they're actually track marks of the ambrosia beetle. They like to go into this tree and go through the tree and eat the tree, and that's how you get these incredible patterns on there. These are really good for making veneers for cabinetry, or if you, let's say this is not really a book matched one, but let's say that you did have a piece that you resawed in half, and you could make the inside of a door panel on a shaker style cabinet door. This would look phenomenal as the interior. Obviously you'd have to cut it a little thicker. I was doing a little veneer work with these, messing around, but that's what I would do. I'd cut it probably about that thick, maybe about a ½ an inch, and I would use that as the interior of, let's say you had a shaker style door. So here's your maple, or you could even use a piece of hickory, and then you'd have your interior panel that shaker door, and that's a phenomenal combination right there. I wouldn't even put a stain on that. I would just use an oil-based finish and make it really glow and really bring out the rich beauty of this wood. Okay, so I just got one more piece that I want to show you, and this is it's getting to be a little bit more common. This is a piece of sapele. Now, what I love about sapele is, number one, it's a very stable hardwood, and it doesn't have much of a grain pattern at all, but it has that deep, rich color, almost like walnut. It's lighter than walnut, but it's not as expensive as walnut, but it can be pricey. I'm telling you right now, this is not cheap. Sapele is not cheap. But this, to make a table out of this, would be just insane. Very stable wood. It mills up beautifully. It is a little bit, a little bit tough on the tools, kind of like the characteristics of walnut, but the result is phenomenal. And when you put a finish on this, now you're skipping a step right off the bat. So if you're thinking, okay, well, that's expensive, why am I going to use it? You know what? You're already skipping a step of staining it, because you don't have to stain it. All you have to do is put a finish. It's already pretty much the color that you want, and depending on if you use oil or a water base, you're going to get a different rich color from that finish. So just skipping that step, and also skipping the, having to buy the stain, the labor cost and the cost of the stain kind of makes up to me for getting this done and just slapping a finish on it and be done with the project and have that beautiful rich tone to it. So there's things, you have to weigh the options sometimes, you know what I mean? Is it worth going and looking for getting a piece of poplar and trying to get this color and putting a stain on it and spending either a day or two staining it and then spending another day or two putting the finish on, or buying the Sapele for a couple of bucks more and just building the project and spraying the finish and walking away and getting what you want? All depends on your clientele and what your budget is too. You get that profit margin, you got to look at that. So, all right guys, I got plenty more projects to come. I hope you guys like this video. I think it's pretty informative. There's a lot of people out there that always ask me this question: what kind of wood should I use for this? And how do I finish this type of wood? Should I paint this? Should I stain this? I heard that if you use pine, there's a lot of blotching. I heard if you use maple, there's blotching. There's truth to all these things, and I hope that I gave you a really good insight of what I do and how I choose my lumber. And another thing I'm going to tell you is, do yourself a favor and find a hardwood dealer or a lumber dealer that's close to you, close enough, even if it's a half an hour drive. You will save tons of a headache and tons of money milling your own lumber if you have the equipment to do it. Also, if you go to those places, most of them, 99% of those hardwood dealers and lumber dealers already have S4S, which is surfaced on four sides. They already have those boards made for you, so you can walk in there, and I've done it myself. If I need to save time and I'm making something out of poplar, I'll go and I'll buy 100 board feet of S4S poplar, 10 feet long, 12 feet long. And you know what? I know that if I'm making some type of a carcass where that's going to be as a face frame for a built-in or edge banding a shelf, I don't have to worry about if it's perfectly straight or anything, because once I have the plywood backing and it's going to get nailed or screwed to that plywood backing, it's going to straighten it out anyway. All right, so that's some of the things you got to think about. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Definitely hit that notification bell. That's going to let you know every time I upload a video. Thank you for joining me in the shop. We have plenty more to do. I have some tools and stuff that I want to do reviews on, and equipment, things that everybody's asking me about, the sliding table saw, and I think I have enough projects and hours on it right now to really do a good solid review on this thing. So that's coming. All right, I'm also going to teach you, if you do have, some of you probably have or have come across a sliding table saw, and there's a lot of techniques that I can teach you on this, and I can also relate them to a regular table saw as well and show you how to do things if you don't have something like this. All right guys, so thanks for joining me again. Make sure you click that subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, leave some comments, some nice comments. All right guys, don't leave me any crappy comments. All right, and questions and things that you have that I can really answer that will benefit you and everybody else on this channel that may be afraid to ask those questions. All right guys, so like I said, thanks for joining me. We got a lot more videos to come, so stay tuned. All right guys, have a great weekend.